masih dosen ketut rumput tansah reruntungan ing sarina sawan datang hingga sarang lamun atau saketing ati yang cerdas tansah mulat sida kasih Indo mimi amin tunno ayo bareng rimas anak tepi mati Indo asik
Yang kok berkasih lebih Nyampe batin Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Selamat siang Pak Julaihi. Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum. Sehat, Bapak sehat?
Sehat Pak Julaihi. Alhamdulillah. Mungkin kita akan mulai Pak ya, dalam prosedur mulai. Siap. Baik. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Selamat siang. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Perkenalkan, saya Yusvan akan menjadi host Anda dalam acara 3-in-1 lecturer series. This is the first series of our 3-in-1 program in Department of Architecture, Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Brawijaya. It's been a pleasure for us to welcoming you to this event, and for the next, I think, around 2 hours, we will enjoy the day with the hot discussion about the theme today. And to save the time, let we start the day. The next, we will hear our opening remarks by our head of department, Mr. Harry, Doctor of Engineering Harry Santosa, and Mr. Harry. Are you already in here? Okay, Mr. Harry in here. And yes, the time is yours. Please, Mr. Harry.
Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam sejahtera buat kita semua. Praise goes to the most merciful God Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for the blessing of life and knowledge for us together in this meaningful occasion. Thank you for your coming today. To start with, I would like to warmly welcome to all guest lecture in this event, Prof. Julaihi. To meet again with us in Budaya University. And Prof. Julaihi is from Fakulty Alam Bina University Sarawak, Malaysia. And also warmly welcome to Associate Professor Dr. Ulrike Herbig from Vienna University of Technology. This is the second time for me to meet you again after INSAN 2017, I think. Yes, it is a great pleasure to have you with us today. I would like to say thank you very much to the entire committee of the 3-in-1 program, especially great thanks to head of Laboratorium and all members of Nusantara Architecture Laboratory who had, I think, hard work to prepare this first webinar with very well handled, I think. And also, last but not least, I express my pride and gratitude to all the guys and all the students of this webinar. The theme of this first webinar is Pelestarikan Arsitektur Nusantara. It's meant to melestarikan budaya, guna, karsa, dan karya, culture for the future. This topic. The 3-in-1 program is a form of a joint collaboration between a local higher education institution, foreign higher education institution, and also practitioner, academic in organizing academic lectures, seminars, workshops, and architectural studies that will facilitate the teaching of skills in high technology and support postgraduate level education. I think thus enabling production graduate with useful competencies. This program will also increase the level of competence again international standard, while also promoting design and research development in our country as a whole. Moreover, the visiting professor program like 3-in-1 is designed to involve 3 important parties: senior lecturers or professors from international institutions, also lecturers who teach courses and practitioners to produce investment in teaching, praxis, and research activities. In other words, this program is especially designed to combine one theoretical class study, simulation class, and also practical implementation of these values and scientific content of Nusantara architecture in today's architecture and environment. Architecture Department, Faculty of Engineering, Universitas Brawijaya believe it is important to all guest lecture, especially Prof. Julaihi and also Associate Prof. Ulrike Herbig and also using from Studio AKANOMA, who consistently, I think, build and develop local wisdom through socio-architecture with architectural principle for all, who are aware of the physical, social, also cultural environment and ecology. So at this conference, I think we will get a lot of important knowledge about culture for the future. By this, I hope this webinar beneficial to all. So that's all my opening remarks. I cover with wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yes, thank you, Pak Heri. Okay, for the next 2 hours, we will enjoying the main discussion that will be guided by Mr. Abraham Muhammad Rijal. For your information, Mr. Abraham is one of our lecturer in the Department of Architecture, Universitas Brawijaya. As a lecturer and a researcher, he interests focused on Islamic architecture, gender, and related social issues about architecture. To save the time, maybe I will give the event to Mr. Abraham Muhammad Rijal. Time is yours.
Okay, terima kasih Pak Yusman. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, welcome all guys here, and first, thank you so much to Professor Julaihi, and Ms. Ulrike to join in our webinar today. I want to tell you all this. Like Mr. Herbig, we have two speakers today. There is Professor Julaihi bin Wahid from University Malaysia, Sarawak, and second is Ulrike Herbig from TU Wien. First, before we start our discussion here, I want to tell you that Mr. Julaihi bin Wahid, Professor Julaihi, is a professor from University Sarawak, Malaysia, and his specialization is human settlement, housing policy, urban housing design and development, design, urban management, and urban technology, technology, Nusantara, tropical agriculture and sustainable development, and last, urban tourism and development. Yeah, yes, broad research, yes, and it's useful. Let us started. This research is about housing design transformation, innovation to urban comfort, and indoor air quality, on September 2018 to August 2020. Yes, it was research training. Besides that, he has a lot of publication, some research, and he also become a professional organization in architecture of Malaysia. Yeah. Today, Mr. Professor Julaihi bin Wahid will present about Pelestarikan, Arsitektur Nusantara, and the title is Urban and Architectural Preservation for the Future. Yeah. To honor Professor Julaihi, and he came from Malaysia. He has the same culture as us. Let me give you update. Malaysia is same culture as us. Okay. Sorry, I cannot say something in English, but I will say something in bahasa Indonesia. Judulnya adalah kekal. Yang awak akan dikenal. Webinar kali ini tentang kearifan lokal. Terima kasih semuanya sudah berkenan. that's why it's Jurusan to present your lecture today. Thank you.
Halo, bisa dengar?
Bisa, Prof.
Jelas, Prof.
Oke.
Jelas, Prof.
Yes, Prof.
Jelas, Prof.
Ya,
Iya, Pak.
saya teruskan ya.
Ya, silakan Pak Julaihi.
Lanjut, Prof.
Oke. Baik, dengar ya? Bisa dengar?
Iya, Pak, kita dengar. Siap.
Baik,
Clear, Pak. Clear.
Baik.
Absolutely clear.
Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
selamat sore. Saya terlebih dahulu, first and foremost, I would like to thank the faculty for organizing this dissemination of knowledge. I would like to thank the staff of Fakultas Engineering Technique of University Budaya. Also, I would like to thank the committee as well as Professor Ulrike also sharing this part the next session with me, and as well as the audience. Saya nampak beberapa muka yang saya kenal di sini, Pak Riyandi, Pak Heru, Pak Prasetmo, ya, Pak Bungkas, Pak Bambang, Pak Sigit, nama muka-muka ini saya kenal, insya Allah. Ya. Baik, untuk permulaan, for the beginning of this lecture, as I've been given the theme of Pelestarikan Arsitektur Nusantara, what I would like to share with you is the urban and architectural preservation for the future. I look it at a different angle. Before we browse through the slides, let's check what we had gone through, as we had understand that Nusantara, as we had discussed earlier, according to the Sumpah Palapa in the 14th century, it covers a wide area. Nusantara is not isolated. It is very important region due to its resources, due to its strategic locations, and also the trade route from the north, the south, the east, and also from the west. Then once we look at all these angles, then we know that Nusantara is the attention, as I mentioned earlier in the previous lecture, it is the attention of all the worlds. Yeah. And then we have to admit that Nusantara is not free from all the implications or what had happened in the era of the world and how it affects our region. When we talk about the pre-industrial era, that is since 1760, and then come the first industrial revolution. Yeah, maybe at this moment in time, we are not yet what we use the term civilized, but we are already there. In the islands of Java, islands of Sumatra, the island of Borneo, the island of Makassar, there are people over there with their own culture, with their own build form, with their own lifestyle, and the way they use the resources. Although modernism come later, we cannot run away from modernism, and modernism come to Nusantara also because of internationalization. There is the trade between the East and the West, the East and the East, and also within the region of Nusantara. And then come globalization in the 80s. It is a very drastic media influences, as I mentioned in a previous lecture, that the people in Papua New Guinea, they wear Michael Jackson t-shirt, yeah? And in New York, also people wearing Michael Jackson t-shirt. we see the drastic media influences. And also at this time, during the 80s, we are influenced by the CNN, the Al Jazeera, the BBC, all those news and media, it influences us. And come the millennium, we stop for a while. We ask ourselves, what really happened now during the millennium? And how the millennium affect us? And during this millennium also, then the question of MDG came in, the Millennium Development Goal, and why it happens during this period of time, and how it affects us in terms of our attention to the world, our attention to the poverty level, and our attention to the population explosion. And at the same time, with the Kyoto Protocol and whatnot, we are influenced by the issue of climate change. Then come the green architecture, then come the sustainable, and lately come the pandemic. All this series of happenings and events, it affect Nusantara as well as the architecture itself, and also the life of the people in Nusantara, especially those living in urban areas. Ya, secara nggak langsung dia akan mempengaruhi kehidupan kita dan memberi implikasi kepada kita di dalam kehidupan seharian, di dalam macam mana kita melaksanakan kehidupan ini, dan juga memberi tekanan kepada kita. It gives pressure to us. So starting from here, yeah, we as an architect, we think about how to tackle the problems. But when you tackle the problems, be wise. We have to think and look at the conditions wisely in every different angle, so that this will not be jeopardized in the future. Some said that, oh, kita ubahkan ruang kita supaya memenuhi pandemik. Tetapi kita kena pahamkan bahawa pandemik ini adalah secara sementara, kita harapkan. Dan kalau kita mengubahkan arsitektur itu berasaskan kepada kondisi pandemik, berarti perubahan ini akan meninggalkan kesan lebih negatif daripada positif. Yeah? But we just look at in Indonesia itself. Berlakunya ledakan gunung berapi. Orang bisa hidup lagi. Orang membangunkan bangunan lagi. Membina rumah lagi. Dianggapkan itu sebagai sementara. And then with all this, people become more innovative and then become more inventive. Ini yang memberi kesan kepada kita bersabit dengan arsitektur. So as a result of this, we become more and more resilient. Resilient, kekentalan kita terhadap apa yang berlaku di sekeliling disebabkan oleh bencana, disebabkan oleh penyakit, dan mungkin disebabkan oleh peperangan. Kita di Asia Tenggara, di Nusantara, kita bersedia. Ya, walau macam mana pun kita tengok macam mana how we become more resilient with this life due to several factors of what's happening around the world. Alright. We also influenced and also gone through all this colonialism. This colonialism by the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Americans, the English, Japanese. None of us free from all this colonialism except Thailand. That is the northern part of Thailand. Even the southern part of Thailand, that is the Patani, also influenced by the colonialism. Hence, each of this colonialism, it leaves some trace to us. either in terms of buildings, either in terms of ideology, either in terms of our emotional, emotional affections, or it affect the society as a whole. We'll see when the colony, all these colonials people come and conquer us, they never think about how to build the house for the locals. They just think about building a port for them to collect all the agricultural resources, minerals, and they build the godown. They build the godown, the warehouse to store all those minerals, resources, and so on. And they built the mansion for the managers and some offices. If you look in big cities in Indonesia, Jakarta, Medan, Surabaya, Malang, a lot of these buildings only for the colonial purposes. And all this structure remain in our environment. And we, as an architect, we are anxious to preserve this building. Kita menjadi kaget untuk mengkonservasikan bangunan-bangunan ini. Dan kita dipengaruhi dengan teori-teori conservation and preservation untuk mengekalkan struktur-struktur ini. But when we look again at the implications of colonialism, it leaves us some aspect of regulations, law and order that we inherit from them, like the Indonesians, some of the law from the law, the words, everything from the Dutch, they inherit until today, the Malaysians and all these straight settlements, we inherit the law and order and regulation from the British and the Filipinos from the Spanish, Americans. At the same time, they create divide and rule policy. They divide the rule and rule policy. It creates segregation and discrimination that we become immune, or sometimes we try to follow. And yet before this, there is no term of discrimination in Indonesia, no term in Malaysia. We use the term diskriminasi that we borrow from English. In Malay itself, there is no word of discrimination. But we learn from all these colonial people. And sometimes it led us to mental downturn. It killed the spirit, our spirit, to survive our spirit in terms of self-esteem, in terms of pride. They kill it indirectly. As a result of that, we don't fight for independence. Only after a certain period of time, what happened to our neighbors, then the spirit of independence come in, and then we try to adapt democracy. This democracy that we propagate until today, is that a true democracy? These are some of the issues that I try to relate with architecture and also urban preservation in this era. To some people in some countries, they try to forget colonialism. They want to demolish the buildings. Is it sensible? If you demolish all the buildings, you erase the visual images, but you didn't erase the ideology. So these are part and parcel of the effect and cost of preservation in relation to colonialism. All right. Then we discuss on preservation. When we discuss on preservation, these are the questions that keep on asking by the students and also being asked by those people who has no interest in preservation. They ask us what to preserve, what to conserve, why you want to conserve, why you want to preserve, for what reason. And in architecture, when you want to preserve a building, to what level of preservation that you want to do? Yeah. And also even the term of conserve, ya, preservasi dan konservasi. Apa perbedaannya di antara preservasi dan konservasi? Ada yang membuat joke, dia mengatakan preservasi ini macam kita membuatkan manisan-manisan. Kita simpan di dalam botol, kita preserve. So is that the exact definitions, or is that a joke that what we are doing for the architectural buildings? Yeah. And then although these two verbs are almost similar, but we have to break it into several pieces and to disintegrate it so that we can understand why we do the preservation, why we do the conservation. And then preservation, ya, ada di antara preservation ini dikaitkan dengan mengekalkan struktur bangunan, mengekalkan fasad bangunan, ataupun mengekalkan keseluruhan bangunan. How do we preserve it? Are we going to preserve it based on SPNEA, as I mentioned here? Okay. SPNEA level of preservation. SPNEA, yaitu Society of Preservation North England Antiquities, mereka preserve bangunan itu mengikut the level of almost 100% preservation. Dia akan mengkajikan bahan-bahan itu. For example, the bricks. What type of bricks do they use? How to recreate the bricks? What are the content of the bricks? If they use lead, so how to use the lead, the sheet of lead for the gutter, and the column. If they use this type of masonry for the columns, jenis apa sedimentary rock yang digunakan untuk kolomnya. So, like us, sometimes what we did are not preservation. It is more towards renovation. Yeah? Some of us, we renovate the structure. We just change the components of the building. We are not really preserve it according to its original status. And when we talk about conserve sometimes in the Western theory, it covers a broad area. It's not only in terms of a specific building. It covers the community as well as sometimes it touches on the environment. Yeah, we try to protect the environment that is for the benefit of the people. This is mostly done in relation to what is the main issue right now. We are talking about the depletion of resources. We are talking about ecosystem that is being affected by the climate change. And all this, it will, one way or another, will affect a single building as well as the neighborhood that may require us as an architect, the action of the architect. Yeah, what action that we want to do. Yeah, not only in buildings, When we talk about preservation and conservation, we're talking about resources. While we go for green architecture, we are being taught by our lecturers to utilize, I use the quote unquote free energy, the sun, the wind, the rain. How are we going to use all this? And to conserve the resources, not to make waste, not to just simply throw all this waste into the river that will affect the ecosystem of the river. And the river is the nerve of the citizen in the urban areas or in rural areas. And then once we pollute it, so we don't preserve it, we don't conserve it, so what is our action? And also conservation of the community, how we conserve the community. We don't want the shift of activities. For example, just take Yogyakarta. If we stop the people in Jalan Malioboro to do the traditional trading and so on, what happened to the street? The street is dead. The people do not have income. The street is empty. There is no life. That is just the example of a shift of activities. Okay, in some areas, we even close the traditional market. But we forgot that the traditional market is part of the community contribution in terms of suspended cash money in the market, as well as the traditional market also propagate friendship, healthy living, job opportunities. It increases socio-economic of the people. But we forgot about that. As an architect, we just think about buildings. And we don't encourage migration. Migration may happen due to the change in land use. Those who practice smallholders yang bertani kontan, apabila tanah dia dibeli untuk membuat kafe dan sebagainya, orang itu berpindah ke kota. Apabila berpindah ke kota dengan uang yang 100 juta, dia belanja setiap hari, nggak ada kerja, uang itu habis. So what happened to the community? And also income generating society. How we want to create the income generating society? Through tourism. How to sustain tourism without affecting or destroying our life in the community. And at the same time, income generating in terms of technology that we want to propagate. I mentioned here appropriate technology. As in Indonesia, you will see the people are very, very creative. A lot of those inventions they use to earn their living, it is based on appropriate technology. It's not high-tech, but they use it daily to complement their daily activities as well as income generating. It creates employment and it sustains the community. And on a larger scale, the environment that we conserve, we want to make sure the environment is conducive for human habitation. So how to create the environment that is conducive for human habitation? We don't want the area to be overpopulated, for sure. We don't destroy greeneries. We don't destroy green lungs in the cities. The street is walkable, no fast vehicles, reduce traffics. Okay? So these are the ideas that we want to inject into architecture curriculum for the future generation. so that the future of architecture that we try to introduce helps to change the mindset of the young architects. All right? And we have seen how the community works in the gotong royong basis. But all these are slowly disappear in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Nusantara region. It did almost disappear. The spirit of gotong royong. Okay? As a joke here, the people in Indonesia and Malaysia, once they change the address, they don't go to the post office to change the address. They change the location of the house. All right, let's look at the urban design theory that relate to conservation. Yeah, in the West, they talk about conservation in relation to gentrifications. Gentrifications, it started in the 60s during the period of hippies, where the people moved to San Francisco, buy all these properties, and they modified, make it better, and people started to come and living next door, and then the whole stretch become good areas, good facilities, good living environment, and then they gentrified the area, and it improves the quality of the units. But in Indonesia and Malaysia, we don't practice that. We don't see that. Yeah. And housing filtering. Housing filtering, those houses that has been accommodated by or inhabited by the certain group of people, once their income increase, they sell the house to the low income people, and then they move to medium income housing. Yeah, but this theory, it does not apply to us. We don't practice it. And the next one is revitalization. Revitalization, some areas, especially in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in the 80s, the river is considered as the back of the house. We don't utilize and we don't build our house fronting the river. The river is always the back of the house. But today, most of the rivers are being revitalized and is being used for recreation, used for activities that increase the economic property of these areas. And this is the examples of gentrifications and housing filtering, where the people, after they stay in the house, they got a good income, they move to another better and big house, and the existing house they sell or they rent to the low income people. Okay, and with respect to this, for sure, we don't go for renewal, because renewal does not relate closely with conservation or preservation. But if you look at the three theory that has been used by the Western world, gentrification, housing filtering, and revitalizations, all these theory, it lead to conservation. Yeah. And single building preservation. If you look at a single building preservation, you ask, as I mentioned earlier, why we preserve. Don't simply preserve for the sake of preservation. That is the reason why during the colonial time, some people don't like the idea of preservation. It reminds them of the mental torture when they look at the buildings. The mental torture they had experienced during the Japanese era, during the Dutch era. Yeah? So you have to signify, and also you have to try point out, is it the building related to important person? Is it the building out of style? Is it the building the only trend of architecture during that period? Is it the building a very articulate a facade? Is it the building related to important, significant person? Yeah? The building has been used by Bung Karno during the independence discussion. Then there are some reason for that. If we preserve just for a matter of preservation, so we have to look again. So what to preserve? Are you going to preserve the facade, the structure, the whole building? What about the cost? This is the end result that people will ask us. Is it worth to preserve the building if the cost escalate to a certain price? If we build 40 units of low-cost housing for the poor instead of conserving one building to commemorate the Dutch rule. So these are some of the controversy that the people will question. So that is, as an architect, we have to think about this in relation to how to balance what is negative and what is positive, what is interest to the community. And that's the reason we mentioned about community conservation. We conserve the community. We don't want the community to migrate. We want the community to stay there and try to think about how to provide jobs for them, how to create income generating events or activities for these people. And then when you want to preserve, how to preserve, what level of preservation you want to do. And we have to differentiate the difference between preservation, restoration, additive use, renovation, and beautification. So which approach of this single building that you want to go for? As an architect, I just throw out all these ideas for you to think. Although some of the lectures are overlapping, but in a way, I want you to think and I want you to visualize to make sure that you are going to be the future scholars in architecture. Look at things in a broader sense. As I mentioned earlier about the preservation, after you differentiate what level of preservation or restoration that you want to go for, and look again, look at the structure. Is the structure worth to be preserved? What about the services? What about the building envelope? What about the materials? Which level that you want to preserve? And go again with the cost. Can we afford it? And then if I preserve this, instead I can build 100 units of low-cost housing for the poor people in urban areas. Why not? Okay? Then, these are the issues in urban conservation. Why there is perubahan guna lahan akan menjejaskan konservasi? Why change in the land use? It will affect the urban conservation. We have to look back.
Belajar KP. Belajar apa? Orang tiap awas Kak, pelan-pelan Kak. Lo.
Hello? Hello?
Okay, Professor, no problem.
Oh, okay.
Just continue.
Saya continue ya. Okay. So the change in land use in some areas, kalau kita tengokkan di kota-kota, lahan ini sudah dizonakan. Dan selain daripada sudah dizonakan, ada juga lahan yang dikirakan lahan untuk kegunaan masyarakat. Lahan yang digunakan untuk keagamaan yang berhubung dengan culture. Dan apabila perubahan-perubahan ini dilakukan, dia akan memberi kesan, it will give a certain implications on the, maybe once you build a certain apartments, it will increase the density. And then once you build a building in a certain areas that contradict to the interest of that community, it will also affect the conservation area. Yeah. And other thing is the Rent Control Act. The Rent Control Act in most of these cities in Asia or in the West also, the rent is already stated and being controlled by the government. If not, people will simply increase the rent. Lagi-lagi di kawasan yang terdapat mahasiswa yang tinggal di kos-kos. Mahasiswa yang tinggal di kos-kos ini, tiba-tiba kita menambahkan kadar sewaannya. For sure, they will move out. Yeah, and we don't conserve the people living in these areas. These areas become empty. You know, once these areas become empty, it reduces the activities in the district. And then process of land succession, proses pemilikan lahan. How you change the use, the ownership. This will also affect the urban conservation. And the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance, it is being stated or changed by the council. Ya, pihak Pemko dah mengubahkan ordinan zona dan akan menjejaskan kawasan itu. Contohnya, satu daerah itu ditukar menjadi kawasan konservasi heritage. Can you disturb the land? You cannot build anything. Can you disturb the building? You cannot disturb the building. Can you change the facade? You cannot change the facade. So you have to look into all these issues. And then aesthetic awareness. Then this aesthetic awareness in conservation in most Western countries and even in Singapore, yeah, even in Singapore, our Nusantara region, you cannot simply change the facade of the building without complying to or get the permission from the PEMCO, the council, so that the facade that you change must be compatible to your neighborhood on the left and on the right. And even the color of the building. And you cannot simply hang your laundry outside. It will affect the aesthetic of the urban areas. Okay? And then how you integrate with the new development. When you want to conserve the areas, the new development, do you create a boundary? Or are you integrating it by using open space? Are you going to integrate by using landscaping, softscape? So these are part and parcel of what you as an architect student to think about, okay? And most of the region in Indonesia and Malaysia as well, yeah, in Nusantara region, we have a lot of monuments. We had a lot of buildings that were built during the colonial time. And how you want to rehab it. So this rehabilitation, are you going to change the usage? Are you going to clean the facade of the building that has been used, I mean the materials, they use limestone. Do you use high-powered jet to wash the dust on the limestone? What happened to the limestone? What happened to the monument? It will create a cracks and so on. These are the precautions that you have to think about. And lastly, about neighborhood conservation. Neighborhood conservation is a very, very important right now, especially in the West and also in Malaysia. We're talking about how to conserve the communities. In Jakarta, they introduced a car-free day. Car-free day, so that the area can be pedestrianized. The people don't have to use fast car to drive into the street. It discourages the people to linger around in their area, because with the presence of the people, they create place. That's what we term place making in urban design. And these are some of the issues that in urban conservation that we try to
You have 5 minutes more.
hello. These are part of the issues that we have to think about in terms of konservasi kejiranan ataupun konservasi tetangga. Macam mana kita mengekalkan supaya tetangga itu tidak berpindah, supaya tetangga itu mencerminkan the community is healthy. The community, the existence of this community within the area. Banyak contoh-contoh yang boleh kita ambil di barat ya, kalau kita tengokkan di Wisconsin, ditengokkan di Miami, contoh-contoh neighborhood conservation ini mereka titik beratkan. One good example in Indonesia is Yogyakarta, where the Kampung Improvement Program. That is one way to do the neighborhood conservation within that area. Then, for the future of urban conservation, how are we going to process in terms of promoting sustainable design? Yeah, how you in the urban areas you're going to introduce pedestrianized connections to the streetscape, the existing cultural aspect and resources, promote all this very much related to the sustainable issues.
Excuse me, Prof. Julaihi. Sorry, you have 5 minutes more.
Oh,
yeah.
Give me a few more slides to finish.
Okay, yep. So,
then if you look at all these issues in our design process, in planning and in design, if you look properly how each of these aspects will influence our thinking, as well as to create a place for the people, or to the place for the people in urban areas, it is not an easy task. You can create a street, but the street is not utilized, it's no use. You will see the changes in Loksumawi, yeah? The divisions of the street, it will affect the flow of the people to congregate in that area. And once they change and create it and convert into a certain with a change in landscaping, and they divert the traffic, it becomes one of interesting place. The same with most urban areas in Nusantara region. We try to develop the area by anticipating this development will help to produce a certain result that may be interest to the people, not only for economic purposes. And the same time, yeah, we have to look also at the city growth. If we look right now, most of the cities in the Nusantara region, the urbanization pace is very fast, about 4% to 6%, the urbanization pace, the growth. And how this growth may affect due to the population explosion, and then how the PEMCO think in terms of zoning, regulation, and then how they want to make sure that all these guidelines will be compatible with the growth of the cities. This, as an architect, some of the issues that you have to consider. And, all right, then in order to create the place for the interest of the people, you revise back in terms of circulation, the traffic networks. Do you need cars? Or do you need busways like Jakarta, Bogota, this Blue Sky program? By Blue Sky program, they introduced busways to reduce the people relying on private cars. And by readjusting the traffic network so that the traffic networks can help to enhance the activities. And the open space. The open space, we have to look back. Is the open space sufficient for the whole city in terms of the percentage of open space? How many percent of open space available in the city of Malang, in the city of Medan, in the city of Jakarta? So even if they have, what about the openness? How the public use the open space? Is the open space just a matter of urban parks? You have to think about that. And then in terms of other facilities, where you park your car. When you park your car, you walk to the certain activity area, the marketplace, traditional market, yeah, the cafe. And then each of these existing urban fabrics, you have to consider. And now most of the Ruko, they have two frontage, the front and the rear, depan dan belakang. Then this frontage, two frontage, it helps to reduce the people when they consider the back of the building, they throw rubbish. So they try to avoid that. Once both of this building become the frontage, so the people take care of their frontage, take care of the front of the house, not the back of the house. And how to enhance the activities. In some areas, they create festivals in the streets. They create some new activities, and they have pasar malam, night markets. If you go to Thailand, you go to Kuala Lumpur, you go to Medan, and then this activities is not only seasonal, it is weekly, and sometimes alternate days within a week, just to create activities for the people in the city areas. And we not limited to all this by the zone and so on. And when you come to the implementation, you are thinking about, you are creating a place. Once you create the place, all those factors I had mentioned earlier as an architect, this will lead to the conservation of the urban areas. The urban areas, the conservation of urban areas is not based on design alone. You have to look at all the factors interrelated and all these principles as well, okay? And you have to look at the urban system. Go back to the urban system. The politics, who is the mayor? Siapa dia mayor di kota ini? How he manage this? And how he use the land use in terms of zoning and so on. In terms of design, what are the guidelines being used? And in terms of urban control, the garbage and so on. and the underlying structure, all these areas in terms of hawking and so on, focus how they control it, giving license and so on. So you have to review this one back. And okay, I move faster. And ini kendali-kendali yang harus kita tengokkan, ya. I just browse through this one. And then back to the future of architecture. Architecture has to respond to all this. As you see, urbanization is increasing at exponential pace. Ya, dia meningkat dan bertambah secara eksponensial. Di mana saya katakan 4% per annum is a very great number, great percentage. So people are going for complexities. When they go for complexities, how you as an architect to design those areas of mixed development where the people can commute by using public transport. People can go to the workplace within 10 minutes of walking distance. Yeah. And then all these new offices together with retails and so on. A good example is in Hong Kong, in Taiwan. Yeah. And a traditional office. And then in some areas, they convert it into food kitchen, yeah? And then for the parking structure, they increase the height so that they build after a certain period when the change of use, the people no longer use the building as parking space because of relying on public transport. They convert that space into apartments, into accommodations. And then public transport. Public transport, we are now relying on public transport. Every cities, they are EIL, LRT, busways. People are not relying on private cars. And then apart from that, we are more conscious in terms of pollution. We are more conscious about the waste of resources. And then even in most of developed countries, the future architecture, they're doing and focusing on urban farming. The urban farming with the technology of agro-technology and also with the combination of architects' innovativeness, they introduce urban farming where we don't disturb the rural areas. Okay? And for sure, your buildings, you have to be very sensitive in terms of lights, in terms of airspace for ventilations, airspace in terms of boundaries, airspace in terms of your neighborhood within the high-rise buildings, and then the access, yeah, frontage, the inside and outside the building, as I mentioned earlier, the services, and all this you have to take into account. And with respect to that, in terms of urban conservation, for sure, it will increase the economic prosperity. It will improve the image of the area. It establishes the development guidelines, also establish the development images, and it creates the focal point of that area. And the people are living in harmony. It creates a sense of neighborhood. It demonstrates the uniqueness of the area. You see some examples of big cities in Indonesia. They have their own uniqueness due to the culture of the people. And then you as an architect, you can advise the city council, pihak Pemko, to provide guidelines for shop owners in terms of signage, in terms of the shape of the hawker's stall, the size of the hawker's stall, and also you may introduce a microcredit for the entrepreneurs. As a result of that, we have to conserve the community. We are not going to displace the community. Thank you.
Okay, Thank you so much, Professor Julaihi. And to all audience, I'm sorry for my first session. Mohon maaf sebelumnya kalau tadi suara saya kurang jelas. Ya, sorry for my unclear voice before. Padahal tadi sebenarnya saya mau memperkenalkan Prof Julaihi. Ada pepatah katanya tak kenal maka tak sayang. Namun mostly, fortunately, luckily, mostly participant here know about you. So I think it's helped me. So, okay, thank you, Prof. Julaihi. We have collect some questions, but I will read the question in the next session, in our discussion session. After this, Miss Ulrike Herbig from Vienna University. Okay, Miss Ulrike, how are you? Okay, I will let me read his biography. Okay, I call you Miss, right? Yeah, Miss Uli is assistant professor in Vienna Technology. Vienna, yeah. Hello. Yeah. Hello.
It's working fine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Okay, Miss
No problem.
Ulrike Herbig is associate professor from Vienna University of Technology. He is in Institute of History of Art, Building Archaeology, and Restoration teaching. Yeah. His Hello? Yeah.
We hear you fine.
Oh yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, her research topic is about interdisciplinary recording and documentation of architecture, multimedia and GIS, public participation for the recording of cultural heritage, interrelation between natural and built environment, traditional architecture in Europe and non-European regions, simple method for photogrammetric recording of architecture, innovative recording method. Yeah, this is something really interesting about her is her field research. Her field research is so broad. Especially, he did some research in architecture from Asia, Oceania, Africa, America, and Southeast Asia. The most important thing is an interesting thing is he did some research in Indonesia, especially in Java, Nias, Bali, Sumatra, yeah, and other places in Indonesia. I think it's very interesting. And one more thing I want to tell you all about her is beside his mother language is German, she also able in 6 other languages. One of them is Indonesia. Terima kasih. Yeah.
Okay. Terima kasih, Pak Rijal.
Okay.
But to be honest, my Indonesian is very lousy. Saya bicara bahasa sedikit, Indonesia sedikit.
Okay.
Maaf. So that's why I will speak in English.
Okay.
Sorry for that. I try. Saya coba, but I'm cari kata-kata, and that will take too long, I think. Okay, perfect.
Okay.
So then I will share my screen, perhaps.
Yep. Okay. You can start the presentation now.
Yes, perhaps I find it the right one.
Oh, excuse me, Miss Uli. I want to inform to audience. Untuk semuanya bisa mencatatkan pertanyaan, boleh dalam bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Inggris di kolom chat. Nanti akan kita sampaikan pada saat sesi diskusi. Ya, oke. Terima kasih, Miss Uli. You can start your presentation.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, because at the same time I'm at the sure fix of my institute, but I had to mute this now. So, okay. Okay, here is the presentation mode, hopefully. Yeah, wow. So do you see the presenters part or the presentation? Pak Rijal? Maaf. Do you see the presenters mode or the presentation itself without presenters part?
I think it's your laptop, not is a laptop view, not your presentation view.
Now it's right?
Yeah, it's right.
Okay, perfect. I always have to check. This is a bit complicated. Technique and the old ladies don't match. Anyhow. Okay, so selamat sore. Here is selamat pagi, and I thank you very much for the invitation to talk to you today about conservation of cultural heritage by adaptive reuse. And I'm very happy that so many things that I was thinking about in preparing for this presentation were already tackled by Pak Julaihi before, and I hope that I continue some of these thoughts and bring an European perspective into this topic. What you see here is our World Heritage Sites in Austria, and I think this is a very good starting point in thinking about conservation of cultural heritage. So World Heritage idea was developed, of course, for the protection, conservation, preservation of cultural heritage, but how this is really dealt with, especially in Europe, as people think that they have a very good approach to that. I will show you a little later by an example in Vienna. So what I will show you is kind of the good, or the starting with the bad and the good examples of heritage preservation and conservation in Austria. And then an idea of how we approach an adaptive reuse project, and then also of what we learned from Indonesian examples, so that in the future we have perhaps a good way for this idea. So this is not working. Here, my mouse. So what Professor Julaihi already said, what we need if we are starting with this idea for the preservation and conservation or restoration of cultural heritage is an interdisciplinary approach. So preservation, in my understanding, is something perhaps we are not so much focusing on, because it is kind of freezing a certain part in time to have a building or a part of the built cultural heritage environment at a stage that you never know, is this the correct one or is it not the correct one? And everything that happened with this building or the built environment by time is a part of it. So also this should be there somehow, even if it changed it by time. So as you can see here, most of the things that we are doing are focusing on the recording. So recording, measurements, the surveying is the base for everything that happens afterwards. Without good plans, without good maps, it is really very hard to go into a very good conservation process. What we also do is work together with other specialists in their field. With biologists, with chemists, with people working in restoration of art, for example, but also with meteorologists or geologists who would know about tectonic specialities that you have to consider when doing a restoration work. So this holistic approach is something that is very important to find out what is needed, not only for the object itself, but also to raise the awareness about the importance and the understanding of the people living in or around one of these cultural heritage objects. What is also a very good thing to keep in mind, that everything is somehow related to this Agenda 2030. So these Sustainable Development Goals that have been compiled to have a worldwide kind of common task to make the world more sustainable, more livable. So, and the conservation topic is very often put into this agenda or Sustainable Development Goal 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable. But if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, conserving cultural heritage does a lot more than that, and we kind of analyzed others, and here are some examples, but if you really go into detail, you find out it is related to much more than that. So if you are working on the conservation, this holistic conservation approach of cultural heritage conservation, then you will also tackle, of course, the Sustainable Development Goal 4 to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all people. Because, of course, you need to educate students of architecture, but also the craftsmen of how to do conservation and proper restoration work if you want to. Of course, it's also tackling the Goal 8 to promote sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment and decent work for all. So tackling the same thing. If you have then the good workers and the good architects who can do a proper conservation long term, then of course it will open a complete new labor market in these terms. 11 I already said, but also you have an ensurement of a sustainable consumption and production patterns, because reusing local materials, local ideas of how to create not only the proper conservation, but also of how to include all the people around, can lead to this more sustainable and responsible tourism, and so to this including all the patterns that are locally productive. Of course, again, same thing in the action to the climate change combat with the low energy consumption. If you use, again, local material as people did in traditional buildings, then perhaps you will have a very good approach of disaster mitigation in terms of climate, but also perhaps, as we know it, especially in Indonesia, where traditional buildings are very earthquake resistant, so you have also an approach to this disaster mitigation. And last but not least, of course, this should be a common goal. So the cultural heritage is not cultural heritage of just one nation or one group of people, but it is a worldwide heritage, even if the roots for some people are different. But if we lose one of these roots, then all of the societies around the world are losing something. So it should be a common goal to work together on that. And as we do here, we have a network over some continents and discussing about these topics. So this is that we making a global partnership in the Sustainable Development Goal 17. So this is a very good idea of starting with this whole discussion, and to keep it in mind with all the measures that we are taking. And for this, I start now with the example of Vienna, World Heritage and the Historic Center of Vienna. Yeah. Historic City Center of Vienna was inscribed on the World Heritage list already in 2001. Oh, sorry. Oops. I just wanted to make this a little bit bigger. And it is inscribed with criteria 2, 4, and 6. So 6 is always to this connection to the intangible heritage, the criteria of being an outstanding example of a type of building and architectural, technological ensemble and landscape is tackled in Vienna with these cultural periods from the Middle Ages, from the Roman times until the Gründerzeit, so until the 20th century. Very interesting. And we have also a lot of an interchange between cultures and qualities in the urban fabric that is still to be experienced when you are visiting the city. With being in the heart of Europe, a lot of people went past and lived there in our city. So that make it of outstanding universal value, and the decision was very clear, but right away we had problems with our World Heritage Site. So one of those was in Wien Mitte, and we have a current problem with Eislaufverein, and I will talk about this so that you know what is the problem when people think about conservation, and adaptive reuse. Here it was more the adaptive reuse idea of space, not only a building itself, but of space. As you saw before, Wien Mitte is not in the core zone of the World Heritage Site of Vienna, but in the buffer zone. And still there was this idea of constructing huge high-rise buildings, because it's one of the main traffic connection points in Vienna to enter the city from the airport, but also with the train from other parts of Austria, and also even from outside the country. So a lot of discussion was going on, why shouldn't this building be erected? We have here a very famous view, an interpretation of a painter back in the 1800s. And interestingly, if we look at the skyline of Vienna today, this is still more or less there. So how really actual correct this painting of this painter is, nobody really knows, because there were rumors that this person was mainly drunken, sitting somewhere in the restaurants, but and his students did these drawings. But if you look at the skyline today and this one, there are still a lot of things to be seen, and there are no obstacles in terms of high-rise buildings. We know high-rise buildings all over the world are more or less the same, and to have a view like this of an historic cityscape is pretty scarce. So this was one of the outstanding universal value attributes, and so right in the beginning there was the discussion to preserve that, even if this obstacle would have been quite out of this view. So we could solve this problem. The building is not that high anymore, as you can see here. The I find it very ugly, but this is, I'm a surveyor, I'm not an architect critics, but there should be a more sensitive approach to this topic. But this is something people have to learn. Architects have to learn of how to include something in the urban fabric that is existing and has this attribute of outstanding universal value. But to find this and analyze this is very intense labor that takes quite a lot of time. So mostly the companies who are doing this kind of design studies to do a design of for a construction like this, they don't have the time because nobody is paying them for that. So that's why we, as the researchers, those people who are working in the universities, should take care about these things. You see now, nearly 20 years later, we have right the same problem at more or less the same place, but even worse. So you see, before there was this Wien Mitte problem behind this church, but nowadays there is this discussion of constructing a high-rise building exactly behind the Belvedere. And this, as you see, you remember the picture from before, that was a painting, but this is an actual photography. You see, we have, of course, some obstacles there, but there is pretty much of this 18th century skyline of Vienna still existing. This one is a rendering, so this part is just as a montage put in there. And as you can see, it has nothing to do with the whole urban fabric here. So it is really completely out of this context, and so is the decision in the moment of the World Heritage Committee that Vienna is enlisted as the World Heritage Places that are in danger, which is pretty shameful actually, because most of those sites in danger are in war zones, or also perhaps very bad management is around, and that happened in Vienna. So it is not only because of this building, but the city government did not include any advisory bodies. They have no management plan, never had a look at what are the attributes of this outstanding universal value in the city. So that's why the city government or the state party of Austria got an exercise by the UNESCO World Heritage Committee to say you have to create a management plan and also prepare a legal framework that prevents these kind of things to be happening. So you can of course develop the city. So this is not the problem, but the thing is all the development that made Vienna of this outstanding universal value, that took a certain pace and a certain time. And some things are just too much and destroy this space. And if you have a look, there are very interesting films, also renderings of where from you can see this building. It would be so massive to be seen more or less from every place in the city. And it is not like a castle of a very important emperor or of a person that is of high value for Austria. And so it is really discussable why this building should be there and to change the whole urban fabric of a World Heritage Site. So this is something to be considered when thinking of a adaptive reuse of space in the urban fabric. Still, Vienna has, oops, I always go to the wrong changing button. Vienna has a lot of very strict regulations in terms of monument preservation, and you can see here that there are a lot of pretty good examples of how buildings have been restored. Still, even if they look very nice, sometimes you really have to discuss how far can you go when you do restoration. You see on the left side this building in its original state, late 19th century. Then it was, as many buildings, damaged in the World War. And so it lost its facade decoration, and then it got a new new interpretation of the decor in the 1980s. But is this now the right building? Is it a preservation part, or is it just a new interpretation of an historic building? Is it just historized, or is it something that we really can be honest to say this fits to the rest of the urban fabric? So these things have to be considered when you do this kind of restoration or preservation practice, because what did you preserve a certain state? Not really, because it's not exactly the same building. It can't be, because materials are not there, techniques are not there anymore. So we really have to be honest then to say, okay, it's a new interpretation of the history of this building, and we can live with it because it fits to the urban fabric. Same thing happened with this building here. That was kind of completely destroyed and re-erected in the same style. So here though the people really tried to be as close to the original as possible. But still, it is the discussion behind, is this necessary, or couldn't be there another building be erected? But after long discussions of how to proceed, it was clear that this is a very important and point in Vienna. So better to do something that is very similar to what we had before than to do something completely different. And what of course happens sometimes in a very good direction is to really make a very careful, very considered, very detailed, researched restoration of a building. So here it is that the facade of this building has been restored, but in a way that is really close to the original, but not faking or copying it. So using new material and making it in a way that you see it's a modern interpretation of this old part, but it is going close to the to have the idea of the relation in the facade and these kind of things still happening there, so that it is still fitting to the urban fabric. So now to a really adaptive reuse part. Here we have the former royal stables of the emperors in Austria, where you see in front is the historic building, and in the courtyard there are two very modern looking buildings. So we see the historic painting. Oops, sorry, my mouse is playing things. Where you see that there have been the stables. It was another interpretation also of this. A lot of space. People were horseback riding there, of course, with the horses in the stable, of course. And it was not much in use for a very long time. But then there was this idea to reuse it as a center of art and in Vienna. So these new modern buildings have been designed. There have been some other ideas of building here a very high-rise library, but that was then not appreciated by the public. So there was a lot of discussion with public participatory measures, and people discussed a lot about this. But in the end, everybody came to this decision that this is the best way to reuse it. So that we have new buildings here, we have very modern museum technique in there, and other places, or each of the apartments and places in there are used for something, for dance performance. Theater people are doing their rehearsals there, concerts, and a museum for children is in there, so to have something to teach children or to approach art. So a very, very interesting place in Vienna. Back behind here is a very interesting part of Vienna. You will learn a little bit about that after this next slide. So that was a good example of adaptive reuse. Here is one of the coffee houses in Museumsquartier, as it is called now, the former royal stables. Another one that is also promoted as a very good example are these former gaswork stations. So these have been used in former times for storing gas until the something mid 1900s or something like that. I forgot about the direct date. And then for a long time, these buildings stood around in the landscape, not very nice, And then there was this idea of how to make an adaptive reuse. Huge discussion and architectural competition have been done for this. And now it is a center for, with shopping center, a lot of working spaces, a living room for people that don't want to live in the city center, and is also more affordable housing. And it is a very interesting space, a new kind of urban fabric out of Vienna. So that was also something kind of really working as an adaptive reuse. For my taste, I have to be honest, these kind of interventions like here are a bit too much. But this is something, yeah, private subjective taste. What we also have is like reuse of buildings. So that was an old, the Coburg was a palais, so of a very influential family in Austria from the 16th to the 19th century. And it was, as you can see here, an old picture of this. It was kind of a part of the fortification wall of Vienna. So in the mid of the 19th century, the fortification of Vienna has been dismantled, and a lot of things of the Ringstraße have been constructed there. So because there was this defense part with the green part, so here you would have the cannons, and then to see who is coming as bad person who wants to conquer Vienna, you can shoot them here. But then at the time they said, nobody's coming anymore, so we can dismantle that, which is very nice. And that provided the possibility to find a new use for this building, and that's how it looks today. So you have the building very nicely restored, and you have here also a modern intervention. So one of this wall part, so that was behind actually another part of the fortification, was open so that you have a direct access from the street to this building. This part is in the cellars of the Palais Coburg, and it was a former Kasematte, so it is a part where you could bring around the weapons underneath the earth so that you are safe moving around. And the cool thing now, you have huge underground places where you can do a lot of things, like also doing concerts or events of any kind. So these are more modern or recent adaptive reuse approaches in Vienna, but we have also several others in this direction. Something that happened in the 1970s, and this is something that Bakchuali also mentioned, is the gentrification approach. So it happens all around the world. Vienna started this kind of in 1970s, but it was not this approach of gentrification, how it's in the moment. This was really a very round down place in Vienna, behind these former stables that I showed you before. And you see the buildings were really, really in a very bad condition in the 1970s. It was, close to the stable, close to where the soldiers were living. So it was the amusement quarter of Vienna. But then, amusement quarter on one hand, but also a home of the very poor, of orphans and very poor people. And then nobody wanted to live there anymore. And then there was this idea in the 1970s, we dismantle this whole part and we do new housing. But there were already a lot of people living there. So artists and people with open mind, whatever. And they said, but if you, as a city, would provide us some support, we would do the restoration work here. So this Viennese model was then based on the fact that it was a public participatory approach that people who already been living there work together with the city government, and they provided tax support, so that the people really could afford to do these interventions there. That was so successful that nowadays this part of Vienna is one of the really very very nice and also very valuable, of course, parts of the city. And as this Viennese model was working that well, especially in including these Gründerzeit buildings, which are actually quite good in their shape and also very easy to be adapted to very good and usable apartments for modern needs, this model was also used in other parts in Vienna. So that's how we are rolling in the urban fabric. But what is with cultural landscapes? Cultural landscapes also need adaptive reuse, because we have here, like in the World Heritage Site of Vierte Neusiedlersee, that has been inscribed as a meeting place of different cultures for 8 millennia and so on and so forth. It is something also, this includes urban fabric, but also the natural fact. But as Vienna is, with the rising population and so on, endangered, same way also happens in the cultural landscape. And how to face that fact with, in the urban fabric, you just have the city and the built environment with the buildings, but in the cultural landscape side, you have a lot of more of things. You have the lake, you have the reed, you have the fields, you have the villages. Then you have the settlements, the buildings, and then in the buildings, of course, the material, the ornament, and the living place that has been used for a long time, and people who used to have a lot of customs there that you should also preserve. So how we are rolling there is that we are discussing, like here in the master thesis, to find out what was it that made this place of outstanding universal value. So, and how, if now people adapt these traditional farmhouses, if they reuse it for modern living, when is it a good and harmonic example, and when it doesn't work? So because it is, you just feel uncomfortable, but you, and very often you don't know why. And so that's why we are working in that with in accordance to the management plan, where you have some criteria on terms of building heights and so on and so forth, and then analyze what are the elements of this local architecture and what you have to consider when changing it, when reinterpreting it and redeveloping it in a way so that it really fits to modern needs, which is very important. Otherwise you have a museum and nobody wants to live in a museum. So you are, of course, analyzing the villages, you analyze the interrelation between the village and the surrounding landscapes, and then, of course, the details of the building itself with the relations of elements within the facade, but also with the material and details on the elements of the buildings themselves. And this is then a part, if you can put it together, something that you can recommend those people who want to make adaptive reuse and not completely destroy a building and erect it new, of how to do it or not. So this is a guidebook that was developed by us in collaboration with the World Heritage Management in Vierte Neusiedlersee. So that makes it now easier for people who really want to make an adaptive use of a building to go into a direction that is fitting to the development of this World Heritage Site, and not very free interpretation that kind of not related to what happened before. So, but if you want to start something from scratch, adaptive reuse. So we had a very good example here out of Vienna. So Vienna is more to the upper left. Here we have a very nice landscape. River Danube is pretty close with the World Heritage Site of Cultural Landscape Wachau. We have here nice agriculture still around, even some forests, and here lies a castle. So, and the owner of this castle, he came to us and says, so I inherited this castle. What shall I do? I have no clue. So what are we doing? So we do an internet research. We find out, so adjuncted to the castle, which is this part here, is a church. This church is used by pilgrims. The castle has been a museum for a certain time. It is in a not so very much nice condition. So, of course, first of all, you have to do your measurements. So we did a lot of laser scanning around, very fast, and yeah, as you see, nice point clouds around, always same. It's for not really a very good use, but it always looks very nice to have colored point clouds. And we were talking to an art historian to find about what is the background of the castle and its architectural history and the art history, because in the castle are also some elements that look very nice, as you can see here. We have then the plans and find out interesting details in the cellar. We have this very cooperative owner of the building who tells us a lot about the history of the building itself. And then we did collaborate with students. So it was also students summer school who did photogrammetric recordings and also the building research to find out where perhaps we find some details that show about the history of the building. And then we invited, so very COVID regulation fitting, representatives of the main village around to discuss what they would need as a new building or a building of this size for the development of the region. So, and based on that, because what people very often do when they have a castle like this, they say, okay, it will be a hotel, it will be whatever. Or, yeah, it's in most of the cases it's going in this direction. It's a hotel, yeah? But when you go behind that, what you could do there, we found out here is a very interesting chapel within this building. But this chapel is different to the first original planned part. So this floor is a new floor and it should be like 4.5 meters lower. That's why this whole painting is not working according to the idea of the painter. So in this sense, we can do a lot of interesting things related to sustainable restoration, because what we are doing now is a recreation, a 4D or 3D recreation, where you go with your VR goggles and can see how this part would originally look like. We find out that this family who owned the building is very much related to the surrounding region, and that one of the ancestors of the now owner, he was a very renowned botanical scientist at his time, turning of the 19th to 20th century. And what we have around, which is also a very lucky condition, is that adjuncted to the castle, which is here, we have a lot of acres and forests and these kind of things. And as I said, this open-minded owner, he is interested in this agro-photovoltaic thing. So what we are discussing now is to make this as an adaptive reuse part, to create a research facility out in the country. You can go there by train in 1 hour, And how to develop this will be now part of the next studies, involving planning students, involving art historians, involving a lot of agricultural experts in this, including also the photovoltaic experts, and so on and so forth, to hopefully create a very sustainable new use for this really interesting building. So it's not very beautiful, but it's interesting, and it has this really, really nice surrounding. And this has to be included, otherwise the whole idea does not make sense. This is something we also learned from Indonesia, to include the surroundings. So as Pak Rija also already said in the beginning, we learn a lot. So all these kind of things that we are doing there, and what I'm discussing there with my colleagues, we learned from Indonesia, to valorize traditional or parts of traditional houses, to reuse whole buildings, because it's possible to reuse old buildings. We learned to know this fact already during the reconstruction work of these earthquakes in 2006 in Yogyakarta, where a lot of people reused material, not only because of economic reason, which is very obvious, but also to have something connected to their history, to the part of the family they are belonging to, which would be easier to recover of a trauma. If you have something related to your roots, it's much easier to recover from whatever happened before. So we learned also that here there is a new interpretation, a contemporary use of traditional architecture in tourism, where we find, which I found very funny here, the traditional houses in Bali, and you will see there are a lot of Limasan now traveling to Bali from Java and sold there as traditional Balinese houses, which is also a new interpretation of things, where you think, yeah, you could be honest, you can say it's a Javanese house now in Bali for tourism purpose, why not? But also traditional Balinese vernacular architecture would be very nice to live in, perhaps not so easy to be transported. And also elements, perhaps really old ones, are used for tourism purposes, but also new buildings are done in a traditional way, using traditional decoration. And here is, here in Plataran, Komodo, again, Javanese traditional housing, and not Flores traditional housing. So it's mixing around. It is also something that perhaps people should be more honest in telling about where this tradition is coming from, and then also do more like of research and show those architects who do this fancy hotel design stuff, to show that perhaps there would be a very nice local island-related traditional architecture to be reused for this kind of purpose. And what we also observed and experienced and enjoy very much is this reuse of traditional architecture as a completely new style of living. So really use and translocate old houses as a part of a perhaps compound that is new, as a new house, perhaps elements, but whole parts, enjoying that you can use a living space without air condition, and it's still a lovely and nice indoor climate. Then we also learned from our friend Ibu Katika Afandi that joglos can be used as art galleries. So there is still a study going on of how sustainable it is for the art in sorry in a joglo to survive on the long run. But so far we saw that it is working and that the paintings there are in a fairly good condition if you really invest also some maintenance work on the building and on the paintings themselves. And we see how the architectural heritage is distributed. So there are whole companies now selling and buying old traditional houses from people who say, I want to make a new building. But there is now new craftsmanship rising again. So in Kudus, there are so many people know, and even more, it's getting more and more, know how to do the carvings. Sorry. Again. And of course, what happened still is this new interpretation of traditional architecture. New interpretation of traditional architecture that you will find in housing itself, with new elements like staircases, so these ones, or a whole new house, on a traditional house on top of an apartment building here in Gunung Sitoli in Nias, or as you will find a lot of these kind of things all over the place in Indonesia, but here in Sumatra I find it especially funny, with these roofs that are so typical for the region to be used as a cultural identification element in places where you are perhaps sometimes a bit surprised that they are there. But it is something that we experience all over the world, yeah? That people like to be remembered on their heritage. They want to be connected to their roots. So it's not a kind of, so some people would say you're going to a nationalistic direction, but this is not, or it does not have to be the case. In most cases, it's just to find out about, to be different in a very uniforming or globalized world, to have this interpretation of your own cultural heritage. And this is something that is, of course, not easy to be considered in going into a direction that is it's not possible to go in one line. It has, as you can see here, a lot of things that are intertwined in that. So have architectural aspects, planning aspects, social aspects, must not be tensions, but this was for a project where we were talking about tensions with Israel, and this is in some areas really this topic. Then you of course have economy, you have property rights, you have owners, you have the community, and so on and so forth. Then of course you have policies, you have the whole framework of rules and regulations that already tried to preserve the cultural heritage. But and how this is put together, from the guidelines, the practices, the judge-made laws, the financial tools, and so on and so forth. And all these has been looked at together. So that's why we need this holistic approach with all this bunch of people who are working in these different fields and who are somehow thinking of what in my field I can do to understand what is the importance of the cultural heritage for me, for my profession, and how can I preserve it in a way, conserve it in a way, restore it in a way so that it is of sustainable use, not only for one person in one case, but for the whole society, and not only in one nation, but all over the world, so that in the end we have some places that are like this, where the cultural heritage is in line with the surrounding nature. So thank you very much, Matunuon, terima kasih, and back to our moderators.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Uli. Okay, and thank you, terima kasih juga kepada seluruh audience and to audience. I have collect some questions. We have 5 questions for Professor Julaihi bin Wahid, and we have also 5 questions for Ms. Uli. Yeah, I will read it next. Okay, some questions sent privately to me. I don't know, maybe Miss sent. First, I want to ask question. I want to read the question for Professor Julaihi bin Wahid. Okay. Okay. The first question is from Rahmat. What's the difference between traditional architecture and Nusantara architecture? And second, and continued to question by Andi Pramono. Okay, some of the Southeast Asia countries were colonized by the European country, Indonesia by Netherlands, Malaysia by UK, and so on. What is your opinion about some buildings which were built by colonialists are the part of Nusantara archipelago heritage? And how far should we preserve them? Thank you.
You want me to answer now or wait until the 5 questions?
Oh, okay. Okay, the second question, I will combine it into 3 questions. Okay, the second question is from Ibu Novisunu from Brawijaya University, and continuing question from Anissa from Brawijaya University also. The question is, tourism has been viewed by many people in the conservation sector as something that can damage the environment. Whereas, if it refers to the theory of sustainable tourism and ecotourism, tourism can actually conserve culture, the environment, and the built environment by first providing income for one place or object to able to carry out conservation from entrance tickets, rental of facilities, etc. Skills for the community. 3, providing income for the community, and 4, introducing the natural and cultural wealth of one place or object to people around the world. In your opinion, what is the solution of that we can develop tourism in our country region and our country while still prioritizing the conservation of natural, cultural, and man-made resources? And continue to a question by Anasia. I want to ask a question about preservation. This probably happened a lot in our country. In your opinion, do you think it's the right things to use dysfunctional preserved building as a tourism spot rather than changing its use as something that is effectively needed for the area for modern civilization? Also, do you think it's okay to rebuild a preserved building to a safer place that is not the origin of the building? The last question is from Ida Bagus Trisna from Bali. The question, but for after this pandemic COVID-19, is architecture of Nusantara, of Southeast Asia architecture, also had some changes of it? If so, then what kind of tips and solution to face this challenge of this change? Okay, thank you. Maybe you can ask this some questions, please.
Okay, can you lift this? Okay, the first questions, I think about there is the traditional and Nusantara architecture. It goes back to the origins of how we define traditional and then how we define Nusantara. And if you look back at traditional, the definition of traditional architecture, I think this has been explained many, many times by most of the lecturers in Indonesia and also in Malaysia and also in the world. Even if you read Amos Rappaport's book, he mentioned that many times, and also Hassan Uddin Khan, he mentioned in the definition of traditional architecture, and then he differentiated vernacular architecture. Yeah. Okay, if you goes back to the definition of traditional architecture, most of the writers, they use traditional architecture where the architecture are built by the people in a certain context for the specific culture. For example, you build a Malay house for the Malays. The space, it suits the activities of the culture of the Malays, and built by a craftsman who are from local areas with local materials. That's why they call it traditional architecture. That is the definition based on the definition that has been explained by most writers. Even if you check again the term traditional. And some people consider that Nusantara architecture is a regional architecture because it reflects the region. Yeah? It reflects the region of Nusantara. Even the region of Nusantara, it is very broad. If you go to Java, the architecture is a bit different from the architecture of the people in Padang and the architecture of the people in Aceh, and of the people of Minahasa in Gorontalo and Mindanao, Manado. And it reflects the regions. And Nusantara, we cannot simply say, okay, Nusantara is a general architecture of Indonesia. It is not general, and it is not universally can be categorized as one architecture by itself. It reflects by the region of each of these places. The Padang people, why they go for Minangkabau? Why Minangkabau? They choose Minangkabau. Why Minangkabau reflects by the buffalo? What is the significance of buffalo in their life? Buffalo also symbolizes of wealth to the people, and buffalo also used for plowing the paddy field. So that is how the culture is related, that reflects the region of the place. Okay, and then the second question is about tourism and sustainability. Some people nowadays, we realize, as in Asia, we realize after Japanese, the Japanese, they consider tourism as one of the hard cash industry. The hard cash industry, without selling anything, the people come to the place, visit your area, spend money at the hotel, spend money in the restaurant, spend money by using your local airlines, local transportation. That is what the Japanese expect in terms of hard cash. And starting from that period, we Asian countries, we follow. And then we try to upgrade the buildings and so on. And then even people recreate the culture. When I mentioned about recreating the culture just to attract the tourists, and that is not appropriate. In relation to conservation, the next question just now, if you conserve just for a matter of tourism, that is what sometimes it becomes museumifications. We convert a certain area like a museum, and then we let the culture of the people observed by the tourists, and the culture become not authentic anymore. As one writer one writer mentioned about the barong in Bali. It is shown at a certain interval of time. It's no longer sacred, and yet the dance of the barong is sacred. The same with other cultures. And you see the dance of lilin, tarian lilin orang Riau. We show to the tourists just for the sake of tourism. But it is no longer being practiced in relation to culture purposes. We do all this because of cultural demand that our society do it for the sake of originality, not for the sake of just to get the hard cash. As a result of this, tourism become as mediocre, a mediocre act of people doing it without knowing the reason, especially the young generation. I still recall at the airport, I saw one boy carrying a bunga manggar. A bunga manggar is a symbol of marriage in the Malay society. When I asked the boy, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm being asked by the travel agent to wait for the tourists from Japan. Why bunga manggar with the Japanese at the airport? So just for the sake of tourism. And this will lead to the degradation of culture. The degradation of culture will result in no value. So the culture become, okay, the people say that it just to entertain the tourists with dance, with other things. And even the tourists, after a while, they knew that these are no longer authentic. It's not original. Okay, back to the next question in terms of the building. Either we need, how are we going to preserve the building? And do we need to preserve the building as in Indonesia, building built by the Dutch, as in Malaysia, building built by the British and built by the Japanese? Yes, it depends on the government. Some government, they preserve the building just for, instead of building a new building, they keep this old building, do some renovation, they use the space, they save a lot of money. And then if they destroy the building, they use the site for new building, they will spend a lot of money to rebuild the building. And then if we think in terms of resources, conservation of resources, there is no, it is a wastage. It is no conservation of resources. Yeah, we pull down all this building, build a new building just to erase the nostalgia of colonialism. It is not the way. It depends on the council. Some council, they have the money to conserve, they do it. But some council, they don't have the money. So they just leave the building as it is. If you go to Jakarta, some of the gudang-gudang itu tidak digunakan. Most of the buildings empty and become a rundown. The same with Malaysia. Some of the old buildings, they just let it as it is. Then after a while, you see the roof collapse and the floor collapse because most of the buildings that was built by the British during that time or Japanese, the floor is made from wood, timber, and then the roof is made from timber and roof tiles. So it will lead to, they destroy the natural features of the building. I think I answer all of that, Mr. Moderator.
Okay. For the last question, has you answered it?
What is the last question?
What is the effect of this COVID to our architecture? what should we do next?
What should
we do next?
What should we do next?
Yeah.
Is in terms of there's one question in relation to the pandemic. We cannot predict, as you see, 18th of March. That is the beginning of pandemic. That is, we thought that the pandemic happens in Wuhan, China. It does not come to Indonesia, does not come to Malaysia, does not come to Italy, does not come to Vienna, but we cannot predict it. Do we architects need to change the space, to change the building just to respond to the pandemic? To me, as far as I'm concerned, the pandemic can be said, not going to stay here forever. It's going to be over within 2 years. With the discovery of the vaccination, ya, adanya vaksin ini, insyaallah pandemik ini akan berlalu. It will be over. And once it's over, if we change the architecture, we change the space. What's the use of the space after that? It is similar to a good example is the Japanese. The Japanese, you ask yourself, apa malapetaka yang enggak hinggap di Jepang? You sebut typhoon, you sebut earthquake, you sebut tsunami, you sebut mudslide, you sebut saja segala-gala malapetaka alam itu, musibah alam menimpa Jepang. Tetapi the people are strong. The people are very, very strong. The tsunami come, they wake up and build their life. The typhoon come, they wake up, they build their life. They never give up. So this example should be followed by us. We never give way, okay? We find a way how to survive. This pandemic is temporary. I bravely say that this pandemic is temporary. It's not going to be forever, inshallah. Okay? So just live in it for a while, then we content with what we are having now, and we try to fit into how to solve the problem of the future with architecture by ignoring the pandemic. Thank you. Bisa Pak? Hello? Hello?
Okay, Prof.
Sorry.
Yes.
Ya. Itu saja Pak. Halo.
Okay.
Okay, maybe I will interrupt the moderator. Maybe there is some technical problem. So maybe we move to Uli because Uli have to go in 15 minutes. So please, Uli, to answer the question that has question to you. Maybe Mr. Rijal, can you help to?
Sorry.
Or maybe you have the question. Have you read the questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's some question. So Andy Prabono asked, could you please describe what is the reason there is a high-rise building and modern architecture in the middle of Eislaufverein? So this is a rendering that I presented. In the moment, there is another ugly building there. It's the Intercontinental Hotel that has been erected in the 70s. It was one of these Pan Am hotel chains, one of the first hotel chains that have been developed in Europe. So it has its kind of own charm, but this level-wise not so much disturbing the whole settlement so far. It was this this need in the 1970s, to get rid of old things and to have these very modern interpretations. So nowadays, I thought so, we should be a bit more aware about things and perhaps a bit more clever, and not to completely go in a direction that would change the urban fabric so fast. So that that happens, hopefully not. So this is what we are working in the moment as the National Committee of ICOMOS Austria. So yeah, then somebody asked about Nusantara architecture. As I mentioned, I appreciate so much that there is still so much of the diversity of Nusantara architecture available to be seen in Indonesia, and that there is this trend to be observed. And this is that people appreciate it more and more. This is always, if you are in your own environment and have all the things every day and this discussion with Eislaufverein and restoration of things or not and so on, then you don't realize that there is a slight trend coming up that people are interested in preserving also, or conserving, more conserving, not preserving, but conserving their cultural heritage. So there are more people interested in finding out traditional techniques of painting old farmhouses in Austria. But this is very often just realized if somebody from, for example, Indonesia comes to Austria and says, this is interesting, why are the people doing these kind of things? And this is also something we observe in Indonesia, perhaps more than if you do it in your everyday environment. There is a trend coming up that people are more interested in this conservation, and as there is then more availability and more people knowing about restoration or conservation techniques, it is also getting less expensive. So the possibilities are wider, and so people perhaps are starting to appreciate it more. And there was a question also about like the colonial architecture. Yeah, this is always a kind of problematic thing. If you think about Berlin, where they dismantled this, what was it called? The Lamps Palace of the communist time, a lot of people said, yeah, it was really an incredible, ugly building. But on the other hand, it was a symbol and it was a very important part of the history of the divided Germany. So just to dismantle it and get rid of it, it is like erasing a part of your history, and you can't erase that because it was there. And it is like the Iron Curtain, so that divided Europe into the western and eastern part for 40 years. So this is really like a lifetime. You can't say we dismantle everything and then we say, oh, nothing happened. This is just not possible, and it also does not make sense. You can appreciate the time or not. You can appreciate the buildings or not, but it is a part of the history, and it should at least be in some parts be reflected in the urban fabric, in the cultural heritage. So I think it makes sense to restore bits and pieces if people feel comfortable with it. If it's something like, we have all the concentration camps around in Europe, not very nice. This is a part of history nobody wants to remember. But still now, there are a lot of these places really kept and conserved because it is good to know about this and not to say it is an uncomfortable part of our history and we get rid of it. So to find a way of how to appreciate also this part of the history and keep it as a part of the collective memory alive, and to get to become stronger even in having this around, because people learned a lot in this time too. And the strength of the nation of Indonesia as an independent state now is also based on this experience. So it is necessary to keep it in mind. So it is worthwhile also to conserve it. My point of view, open for interpretation and discussion. So, and this was also, yeah, this presentation. I think I covered more or less all of the questions because they were also kind of interrelated to each other. So if there is somebody still open with something to be asked, please do it again because it's just too much to read it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Uli, sorry, my internet was disconnected. Okay, I'm sure that you have answered two questions before that was stated on the chat, but I have two more questions. Is it okay to read to you? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. First question is from from our mahasiswa. Yeah. Some pictures showed that you showed was so fascinating. Yeah. This picture, especially the picture that contained new and old building joined together. Yeah. Is there any specific method or regulation for joining the new and old building together?
Yeah. Yeah, regulation. So a kind of, Europe and Austria in special is the place for regulations. We have regulation for everything. Yeah, so in terms of, this is a two-folded thing. So one is the regulation thing. And then, of course, it also is not so easy in terms of architecture. So in terms of construction, also get the right material together and so on. So this is a whole study part in our master thesis study program to know about how, first of all, do a proper design so that the things are working together. So in Europe, there have been very good examples, also very lousy examples, of course. But Carlos Carper, if you Google him, you will find very nice examples of how to do this interpretation of new architecture in old buildings. And this has to be done very sensitive, and it is just working if the person who does the design really did a very proper, in-depth research about the building and the surrounding, because you will recognize this on first sight. Yeah? If somebody just made a design because of the design and I'm a cool artist, architect, and so on, then you will see it's not working. Yeah, because the two things are not. This is like a not working marriage. So the people are together, but people will say this is not good. And this is the same with architecture. So if the two things really know each other very well and they are communicating in a way, then this is working. But this really needs a very sensitive architect who really knows about the background of the original building and its history. Then you can make a lot of funny interpretations that are perhaps on first sight a bit strange, but on the second you would know, there is a part in the history that is related to this, whatever weird thing that's happening here, and then it's really cool. But for this, you really have to know your stuff. So know about your traditions, know about your history, and know about the specific of the original building. Then you can make fun design combining those.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I have two more questions, but unfortunately our time is limited. Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
There are some people waiting for me.
Miss Emma and Mr. Yuswan came out to warm me up. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Miss Uli and Professor Julaihi. Let me conclude this our webinar today. Okay. Conservation architecture is not just about building. It's also about people, culture, history, and the nation. So we have to conserve our architecture, and we need to face the future will be better. Okay, I think it's very short conclusion from me. Yeah, I will send back to the host, Pak Yuswan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rizal, and Dankeschön, Uli, and terima kasih banyak Prof. Julaihi for participating in this event, and maybe Uli have to leave, and I will contact you in the near future. Yes, okay, Prof. Julaihi also. Yeah, thank you very much. We will still continue. There is 2 series again in the near future, and thank you all for your participation in this event, and to all of our participant, ya, terima kasih banyak untuk semuanya telah berpartisipasi dalam event ini, dan kemudian kami akan men-share seri kedua yang akan kami mungkin sebentar, saya akan men-share poster untuk seri kedua kami. Oh, sorry. Yep. Jadi seri kedua akan dilaksanakan pada hari Jumat 23 Oktober. Kami membuka lagi secara umum, silahkan Anda mendaftar. Link pendaftarannya sudah terdaftar di sana, dan kemudian juga akan ada e-sertifikat. Kami menunggu partisipasi dari Bapak, Ibu, dan mungkin mahasiswa yang setelah mengikuti seri pertama ini. Silakan mengundang lebih banyak lagi partisipan, teman atau kolega Anda. Kami menunggu nanti. Mungkin
Goodbye. Sorry, I really have to run. Otherwise, they kind of
goodbye.
Not very nice to me.
Goodbye.
Okay, terima kasih, matur nuwun.
Yeah.
Sampai jumpa.
Thank you, ma'am.
Terima kasih, Prof. Julaihi.
Kembali. Terima kasih.
Ketemu lagi pekan depan, Prof. Insya Allah.
Prof. Julaihi.
Terima kasih semua yang sudah hadir. Pak Rizal, Pak Yuswan.
Ya.
Terima kasih. Maaf, tadi internetnya.
Ya, thank you to all. Ya, kami tak akhiri. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Pak Heru, Pak Sikmawan, Bu Lisa. Terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih Pak Yuswan.
Sama-sama. Sukses ya, panitia.
Terima kasih Bu Lisa.
Makasih Bu Lisa. Bu Lisa mau penelitian sama Prof. Julaihi,
Sukses.
sama Miss Uli.
Yuk.
Belum ada foto ya Pak ya? Semuanya ya.
Foto.
Foto Pak, foto. Silahkan dibuka videonya.
Kami memohon mungkin masih ada yang partisipasi untuk yang dinyalakan kameranya. Nanti akan kami print screen. Monggo Pak. Masih loading. Mungkin Bu Emma.
Bisa.
Suaranya,
banyak yang sudah.
Suaranya jelas, Bu.
Jelas Pak, jelas.
Oh iya.
Oke.
Dihitung mungkin Bu Emma.
Ya, ini masih yang pertama. Banyak yang sudah off, Pak.
Ya, 200 berapa tadi ya? 200.
Tadi 218.
Lebih.
Monggo dinyalakan semua videonya. Ini saya masih halaman 2. Halaman 4.
Sudah sangat sering Pak ada 2000.
Oke, terima kasih. Sudah Pak.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Terima kasih semuanya.
Ya, terima kasih Pak.
Makasih,
Terima kasih Bu.
Lah, Abang ngomong.
Ngake kok.
Ngerti to iki.